ask you, do you have the Zig in your wallet? Do you in your mobile payment wallets? Do you have Zig in your bank to pay anything? You don't have. I can prophesy. We just become like a thorn on the flesh. And I think the challenge is two-pronged. It's not only on affecting OKs and other shops in terms of their competitiveness, in terms of the compliance cost, but it also affects on competitiveness because the informal sector does not pay those costs. So a consumer is faced with two markets: the informal market, where they don't pay all these taxes and levies, and Zimbabwe or another shop who has to comply.
Denny J Show. Zvanga zviri down to up tauraitirwe nyaya dzacho dzese narrative ndaichidwe kana mchida kutipisa deep ndaipidwe make you spill a bean if you know what I mean. Andy,
it's time.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Denny J Show. How are we doing, guys? Thank you very much for joining us on this very exciting episode. We had a very good one last week, and unfortunately, Nash is not here today. Plus, also, is in economics. I don't know what Nash anga. So we had an exciting episode last week. We had Scott, and we got to find out what those guys are doing. They're doing some very good work in terms of the community. Lots of people like that episode. But of course, there's always some who have something else to say about that. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, like, there was a disclaimer on that one because some people thought we should have asked a whole lot more other things. But you know, we don't really ambush our guests. We spoke to the guys from Scotland, and we spoke to Scott, and he was very particular about what we could ask him, and we tried to slide in a few of the other stuff that people wanted to hear. But I'm sure in a future episode we will have him, and he'll be able to answer the other stuff to do with politics and that sort of thing. But today is a very special day. We have a very special gentleman. We have called him, I think, several times on the show. He's always been there for us in terms of explaining to us certain economic issues and that sort of thing. So it'll be very interesting. He's going to give us insights on what's going on in our economy, what's going on in the country, and the way forward. And it's always refreshing to have people who know stuff, who actually studied some of these things that we talk about. So in the studio with me today, I have a renowned economist. He's a very well-known economist. His name is Professor Gift Mugano. He has a PhD in economics from Mandela Metropolitan University. He is also a Master of Science in Economics from the UZ. Master of Science in Operational Research from NAST. He is a lecturer and has lectured at various institutions. He's a distinguished scholar and an authority on international trade and finance. He is currently working with several governments in the region. He is also the former interim chairperson of Zisco Steel, and he was there for, I think, just a year. But he is a very learned gentleman, and he's going to give us insights on a number of things. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Gift Mugano. Professor.
Yes, Dan.
How are you doing, Professor?
I'm okay, my brother.
Yeah, it's good to actually have you in the studio instead of just calling you on the phone. It's very good to have you on the show.
Sure, no, thank you. It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here. I respect your show.
Thank you
very much. Exciting.
How many of our shows do you watch, Prof? Prof, you probably only watched one episode. Have you watched all our episodes, or 10% of them?
I watched a number of them, but the best one of them all,
yes,
the Superman 101.
Yes, that was a good one, Prof.
Yeah, I think he spoke as a Zimbabwean.
Yeah.
He was himself.
Yeah.
Never mind about anything.
Yeah.
He was very cheerful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was not on blinkers or on set parameters.
Yeah.
He was speaking his mind.
Yeah.
I also liked his upbringing, the way he spoke about how he grew up, how he earned his name as Super.
Yeah.
You know, the bus smash when his mother was pregnant.
Yes.
So he was speaking as a person, you know. It's very rare sometimes to see a politician getting out of politics and speaking as a Zimbabwean. But sometimes politics cloud our reasoning, cloud our... you know, you live like an artificial person in politics. When we see, I'm not a politician rather, but when I see politicians, sometimes you see what this person is doing is not real, it's artificial. But Super was a human being. If I was going to put a tag on him, I was going to put a tag of a Zimbabwean.
You wouldn't know that is ZANU-PF, or whatever it is.
So that one struck me.
And it's always good to have interviews where the guests are okay with being asked, because you know, with Super, he said you can ask me anything.
Correct.
Which is always good, because then we get to research and people get to know a lot about him, because that episode is probably now about 222,000 views. Which is very high, and it's actually our longest ever. I think it's like 3 hours and 52 minutes. And like you were saying to me, you watched it and you watched the whole interview in one go.
Correct.
3 hours and 52 minutes.
Correct.
That's amazing, Prof. So it's very good that we could bring you in the studio. I know now you're no longer based here. You're now based in South Africa.
Correct.
Because I have contacted you a few times and you've told me, no, I'm not around and that sort of thing. So it's good that we got time to link up.
Sure.
Let's talk firstly, because I was talking about your history, right? Like I understand you're working with a number of governments in the region. What have you been up to recently?
Okay, so my desire has always been to go international, and my vision, and God has been so gracious to me. So I have a number of assignments which I am working on in the region. We are working with the government of Swaziland on helping them repositioning the country to benefit from SADC free trade area from a capacity building point of view. That is funded by the European Union. So I'm one of the senior consultants working with the government of Swaziland. I also worked with the government of Namibia, developing the master plan for the country on industrialization. And basically there I was working in the office of the president in Namibia. That is 2023 and 2024. Just finished the contract. Very exciting stuff. We focused more also on special economic zone. I did the regulations for special economic zone for Namibian government, focusing on the 14 regions of the country. They call their regions. Here we call them province, but the 14 regions are looking at comparative advantages in each region, what kind of investments could be attracted in a particular region. Very exciting stuff. I liked the Namibians, their work ethic. You would meet people, executives at 8 p.m. To understand.
It's over at 5.
Yes, but you would meet executive, CEO of a bank at 8 p.m. You can meet them at 6 a.m. So they are doing things right there in terms of work ethic. We also did some value chains work in Namibia prior to that. But at a continental level, I've been working with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, developing various blueprints on how to address developmental agenda for Africa. The recent one which we did together was around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where I was focusing on developing on how the African countries can now move into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the common market, and also as customs union. So I did 2 pieces of exciting stuff. You are aware that last week or so, His Excellency President Mnangagwa was in Ethiopia for African Union meetings, and I know one of the documents they discussed, we did it as a team, but I was one of the elite consultants on that kind of assignment on Africa Continental Free Trade Area. South Africa, we are working the Premier Office in KwaZulu-Natal, developing industrial cluster. But also in Zimbabwe, I'm working with the World Bank on reforms around beef and dairy value chain. I'm a contracted as a senior private consultant by the World Bank. Yeah, so that is quite an interesting stuff, but also paying more attention on academics, supervising PhDs in a number of universities in the region, external examiner, Graduate School of Business, University of Cape Town, Namibia University, Lund University, Sweden. But I'm also actively involved in publication of books. I have 6 books, which I've published. They're all, the beauty about being a professor, you can't hide it. It's on the internet. So you can just Google Gift Mugano books, they come out. Nice. Like other professionals where they give themselves titles, and you can't get it on the internet.
So you are a true professor?
Yeah, I am a genuine professor.
Because there are so many doctors and that sort of thing, but I not so many professors, I guess. But
yes.
You are a genuine professor.
Yeah. So I think the important thing is that we need to understand the essence of a title.
Because you've been called a fake economist.
But
by your political
doesn't matter. When you call me, Bagut used to tell me, I go to Zayoja, by the way, that if someone calls you that you're a dog, you must check that if you have a tail. If you don't have a tail, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, he was my advisor. He was my father. I used to meet him quite regularly. Nice. So that is something which I do. Yeah. What is very important is that why do we exist as human beings? Why do I exist as a Zimbabwean? What is my area of specialization? I'm an academic. So I should take pride, and it must be a calling. For me, it's not about a title. Yeah. It's about developing knowledge in that area. And of course, when you are talking about economics, sometimes you step over someone's toes and you are called names. But what is very important, are you grounded in your area? When you become an expert in a particular area, sometimes you will not really care about the title, Professor Mugano. You rather want to be called Gift Mugano, or Gift initial. So when I work with my team in World Bank, I have never said I'm Professor Mugano. I am Gift.
Right.
People who have not earned it properly, they are so particular about titles.
I'm Dr. This.
Yeah. So even with the United Nations, I'm Gift. Yeah. But you will be very particular even if you earned it under a gumtree. You want to call yourself doctor. So the title does not matter. What matters is that are you grounded in your area? And if we want to call experts in that area, can you take on and dignity that I am the expert in this area? Can you rise to the occasion to serve a particular country or your country? Just like in the military. If you are in the Air Force, are you a pilot? You can't just call yourself a pilot and go in there. You get injured. You create disaster. But I think there's also the disaster is that we are also sending a wrong message to the young ones. We are corrupting the future generation by just claiming to be what we are not. What are we teaching the young generation? I think it's wrong. But as for being a professor or a genuine, the beauty is that the internet is there to validate that. Yeah.
So with so much experience and expertise in this field, I'm very surprised that you are not doing work directly with your own government, just like you're doing work with the Namibian government and all these other governments. Why do you think that is? Because now you're a consultant, but you're working with the World Bank, and then therefore the government has to deal with you because you're coming with World Bank. But what I'm saying is, how come they're not dealing with you directly in terms of policy, crafting policy and that sort of thing?
Correct. That's a very good question. It's a polarization. Our government is polarized, and to an extent that if you are seen in the light that you are not ZANU-PF, I want to say that deliberately, you are given a tag and people freeze. They can't work with you. I'll give you a very simple example. Last year, during the ZITF week, Minister of Industry and Commerce was at ZITF. I sent him a message because I just felt in myself that there's something I can do in my country. Right. And I was just coming from Namibia, and I had this burden to say, let me also replicate what I am doing in the region. Because, when you are working in there, even if you go there as an expert, you end up amassing particular skills because you are also working with the international consultants. Yeah. And also with the people in Namibia. So I was so moved by the desire by Namibia to push for set themselves as a regional hub for the Africa, continental Africa and SADC in particular. So I said I can do this for my country. I've done a master plan for industrialization, but in my country, we're importing close to $4 billion worth of goods which we could domesticate in Zimbabwe. And if you look at it, break it down, $2.5 billion is manufactured commodities. $2 billion is agricultural commodities. You are talking about your toothpick for manufactured commodities, chewing gum, pampers, tissues. Do you know how much we import in terms of tissue and paper? We're talking about close to $200 million US, right? Iron, over close to $500 million. Fertilizers, $333 million, right? Pharmaceuticals, over $270 million. So I reached out. I sent him a message and said, Honorable Minister, I am available to help you for free. Right. When you are going to be reviewing your industrial policy, because I was aware that the current industrial policy was expiring. Yeah. So he said, no, thank you very much, Prof, I'll reach out. So he went quiet. So I reached out to the permanent secretary. And by the way, the permanent secretary worked together when I was in the development community. So we used to do work for the ease of doing business together. So for me, it was like it's an ease entry. Let me reach out to him. So I sent him a message. PEMSEC, I engaged your minister, and this offer is also on the table. I don't want to meet this industrial policy in the media. I want to put my input in there for value addition and also to share what I know. By the way, my first job was in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Right. When I left university, I worked in the ministry for 6 years. Deliberately so because I always wanted to be a consultant and a policy advisor. So you can't be a policy advisor when you have not worked in government. Okay. So I went through the difficult times of the economic recession in Zimbabwe in government, working, but I was learning. So I understood. So I also have a passion, soft spot on the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. So the PEMSEC said, okay, we'll reach out. They went quiet. Now they launched the Zimbabwe Industrial Reconstruction Growth Plan. Growth plan. And I was very disappointed. I reached out, and this document is wish-wash. Purely empty, nothing, no strategic objectives in the document. Go and look at it. No targets in the document. It is very good in terms of summarizing the challenges in the country. It's very good in giving aspirational recommendation to say, I'll give one simple example. They recognize that we are spending over $270 million importing pharmaceutical, right? And they say that they're going to domesticate 75 million by allowing that farm to import, to buy locally, which is a good point. But there is no corresponding policy measure to say, how are we going to capacitate the local industry for it to be able to supply nut farm? Right. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing to say nut farm is going to buy 75 million pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to say, what are you going to do to support the pharmaceutical industry in Zimbabwe to build capacity for nut farm to buy? That is not there. Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to talk about, again, the last point I want to mention, they're talking about local content. They're going to push for local content. But they don't have a local content policy. They don't have a local content act. They don't have a local content regulations. We should then legislate the process of promoting local production, local consumption. They just speak about going to be supporting Buy Zimbabwe. How? These policy instruments are not there.
So they have good aspirations, but no plan.
No plan. But if they had engaged me, and I will tell you for sure, I'm not trying to brag, this is an area I am in authority, we could have added value in this whole policy. But because they are paralyzed, because they don't see you as ZANU-PF, because I will tell you it's in the public domain, I'm not a ZANU-PF.
But do you have to be ZANU-PF?
Which is the problem. You don't have to be ZANU-PF to be adding value into your own country. But in Zimbabwe, they have a ZANU-fied system where if you are not purely written and branded as ZANU-PF, you can't serve. So when I was engaging the minister, I was engaging as a Zimbabwean to say, it's just a conscience which was working, which was taking a bit of half of me to say, let me engage. So that's where we miss it. Right? I'm telling you that I was working with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. We developed the roadmap for the implementation of African Continental Free Trade Area. These colleagues of mine in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, they are mentioning the African Continental Free Trade Area in passing as a market for Zimbabwe, right? But the person who was working on the blueprint for the continent is me. And I know what other countries are doing, and I know what Zimbabwe is not doing. So we miss it on this point of politics. I think we do too much politics, that sometimes we miss it. And it becomes unfortunate. Yeah. And for sure, you serve where you are wanted. That's why you see that I'm in the region. And I respect my rights, that I can't then be ZANU-PF for me to be heard. And unless they are comfortable to work with me. In any way, I was going to work for free for them, helping them. And naturally, I would want to do consultants. Yeah. So that's the attack.
All right, let's talk about, you were the former interim chairperson for Zisco Steel in 2019 before retiring in 2020. Mm-hmm. And I think it's on record that you resigned because you felt like, in fact, mm-hmm. Can you just shed light on that one? Like, why did you resign? Because the next question is, I'm going to ask you about the ESA deal. Of course, it was consummated before you were in, but why did you resign just a year in?
Okay, so my reading was that when I was given the position of the chairman, in fact, I was the vice chairman of Zisco, and there was no chairman. The minister was still working on, I was vice chairman and board member. But I was the interim chairman waiting for the appointment of the full board. So my reading is that because it was said clear to me by the former Minister of Industry, Dr. Nzenza, who is now ambassador, that we expect you to support government policies because you are now a board member of Zisco and you are the current chairman of Zisco. So
was that an unreasonable request?
Yeah, it was very unreasonable. Very unreasonable because I was not trained to be shambled or to be whipped into thinking of supporting a particular narrative, which I feel that requires discourse for discussion. I believe in an environment where we could have a robust debate and have constructive criticism about particular policies. So the biggest noise was coming from Minister of Finance. And I made it very clear, even in the public domain, that the Minister of Finance was putting pressure on my minister, then Dr. Nzenza, to say Professor Mugano should keep quiet. And she forwarded me the messages which were coming from the Minister of Finance. So the last day, the date I resigned, I think it was June 2020, towards the end of June. The Minister of Industry phoned me around 10 p.m. And we had a long discussion, and I purely told her that I'm not going to. I would choose, if I was going to choose between being in a board of Zisco and having my freedom to talk about what I think is right in terms of policies, what I think should be done in terms of policies, I would choose to step down. She did not. She then hung out her call, and I said, let me not make a decision when I'm angry. I slept over it. The following day, I then saw that we were going nowhere. So I resigned, and purely because I did not want to be whipped. So I realized ZANU-PF have got a whipping system. When they bring you into positions, they would want you to support policies. In hindsight, I realized that they actually headhunted me clearly to try to contain my critique on the policies. And of course, there were other issues which I had difficulties with in Zisco. I had difficulties in terms of the deals which were signed prior to my involvement in Zisco as a board member. It's all in the public domain. At that time, there was a company which was given cooking ovens of Zisco, which was funded by Decross. So I terminated that deal with the board because there was no proper government due process. It's all on internet. So you can just go on internet and say termination of Zisco deal. You see everything there. we had to respond because there was noise coming from Eddie Cross to say I am a stumbling block to the deal. But the point was that the previous board was not involved in the approval of that deal. The previous chairman of the body, Nyasha Makuvise, was given a letter of exoneration to say you're not involved, so your hands are clean. So when we came in, we saw that all the assets of Zisco were given to that company in exchange for the debt of Zisco. But we didn't have an issue with that from a primary point of view. But the point is, say, who gave the authority? If it did not go through the board, and the agreement which was then signed was a 3-page agreement. Such kind of an asset, national asset, cannot be signed in 3 pages, a standard agreement. And again, it also had a bearing on the going concern of Zisco because it had an annexure which was listing 18 items which were supposed to be attaching to that. So it was kind of taking over the whole company. So yeah, so those fights, I don't like them. But in essence, we as a board, we terminated it and we recommended to cabinet to terminate it, and it was terminated by cabinet. So, but I also thought that as a secondary point, it brought a lot of tension, and sometimes you receive calls from everywhere to explain why you are terminating these things. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about since we're still on Zisco Steel. I'm sure you're aware of the ESA deal, which was supposed to have happened. I think it was it
2010, 2011?
2010, yeah 2011. Yeah. What is the status of Zisco Steel now? And is there going to be an investor who's going to come in to help revive Zisco?
Yeah. So, look, I think the long and short of the answer is that Zisco is a dead asset. In my view, they should just bring it down, sell the steel. And there's also a lot of money in terms of what we call chiupu iron. These are mountains of rubbles which are coming from the production of iron.
But do you not feel it's like an important asset?
So I'm getting there. Okay. I'm getting there. The point is that the technology which was used then in 1965 then is no longer. You can't move with the fourth industrial revolution. You rather bring it down, sell the iron, sell this mountain of chiupu iron and slag, and they can get, for argument's sake, $100 million. You can put a modern steel which is cheaper in terms of because now technology becomes cheaper when you have more advancement in technology than to resuscitate an old horse which is outdated. That's what I think. The biggest asset of Zisco are the mineral resources. So, but you can't use the current infrastructure, which is there.
It won't be efficient.
Yeah, it won't be efficient. In fact, the quality of our iron also is not that higher level, which could be help them to use efficiency. But the advantage they have is geographical proximity of our minerals. So they will rather raise it down and sell whatever which can be sold, build money, and start a new company which will be able to compete. We need that, but they need to look at new technology.
Right. So what impact, if any, has the collapsing of that deal had on investor confidence? Because I'm told ESA lost about 20 million. They started paying salaries to workers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Has that put a dent on investor confidence, do you think?
Yes, ESA is a big company. And when they come, if you win the deal with the ESA, if we had won it and they were going to operate in Zimbabwe, it was going to be an endorsement of investor confidence in Zimbabwe. So naturally, you have a follow-up of investors who are going to be coming to support that ESA deal, ESA investment. So when you have a situation where we had a deal signed by the Minister of Industry and Commerce, then Professor Washman Ngube, and then I think Honorable Mpofu was the Minister of Mines, who then said, I don't want my minerals because this is not a good deal. One government, but having confusion. And at that time, the prices of iron ore was very high, and it was very attractive. Then later on, when you are fighting, the price of iron went down, and there's no business case. So you send a wrong signal to investors that you are not a government which is serious about its investment. You can't quarrel over an investor. They were supposed to address their issues behind the scenes because the same ministers were coming from the same cabinet. How do you sign a deal? Then after that, then someone who is controlling the resources refuse with it. That was, I think, childish and unfocused and lack of national economic priority.
You've been very critical of many government policies, especially the foreign currency auction and all these other things. Are you an ardent critic of everything this government does?
That's a good one. It's unfortunate that, first, I'm not an ardent critic. That's why if you check my submission, when I approached the Minister of Industry and Commerce, for example, I'll give you two examples, two ministers, to show the difference. Why was I doing that? I was trying to create an opportunity for us to have a conversation before a policy is put out there. Not because he has got an obligation to consult me, but I'm being proactive to also value add into the policy making process as a Zimbabwean. So he missed the opportunity. And now I'm now saying this is a useless policy not because I'm not involved, but I've told you, if you look at it carefully with an eye of trying to understand the how part of it, you won't see that answer. Right. Now, there's another Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Dr. Masuka. I have engaged him, like another minister, a number of times. And you know what? I've met him a number of times. And there's no one who can say out there that I've criticized these policies, because I've given my views. There's one day which actually touched me. When I was coming from Bulawayo, we were supposed to meet at half 3 at his offices. And I was delayed from Bulawayo because I was doing some work with another company there. So I then told him, I'm delaying, said, I'm waiting for you. So at around 4 p.m., I was now in Norton. So I said, I'm in Norton, but there's traffic. He said, don't worry, take your time, I'm waiting for you. You know what time I reached his office? It was 7:30. I'm saying it, this is not...
Right.
Yeah. So we had a conversation for more than an hour. And things...
Well, he waited for you for
he
the
waited
3
for
hours.
me. Okay. Things which we discussed in there was the issue of the need for the DFI in the agricultural sector, your agricultural finance corporation, which can support funding of agriculture, having patient finance, which goes to agricultural exchange, which should be a market for grains, not GMB. GMB must be focusing on strategic grain reserves. But the commodity exchange must create a platform for marketing of grains, like stock market, to allow efficient price discovery and to give a good return to the farmers. And also it is very effective in terms of funding agriculture through warehouse receipting system. You can actually borrow money from the bank using a certificate which you get from the commodity exchange. So it takes away the issue of collateral. And these two things are already established, right? They just need fine-tuning, particularly the commodity exchange. GMB need to take a big step, and we don't want to see government announcing price of grain.
So this is happening?
It's happening. So how then do I come out and stand and say the Minister of Agriculture has done wrong by setting up a commodity exchange, has done wrong by setting an agricultural finance institution, corporation, has done wrong by setting up sector-specific strategies like the livestock and growth strategy, horticulture strategy, has done wrong by setting up the dairy sector resuscitation strategy and the various value chains. Now, so those are sector-specific strategies which he has set up. And we had conversation, right? Not because I'm a monopoly, but by the way, also remember he's a fundi. And it was back and forth arguing on that. But when you go to the Minister of Industry and Commerce, where are his sector-specific strategies for tobacco value addition? Do you know tobacco can pay our national debt? We did a research at the University of Zimbabwe, when I was at the University of Zimbabwe, and we saw that VAT from tobacco, if we value add tobacco, it can pay our national debt. Do you know why? Because the current price of tobacco per kg is around $4 per kg, right? Yeah, it fluctuates around that time. But if you value add tobacco, the cost of tobacco per kg, the price of tobacco per kg is $60.
This is if we're making cigarettes.
Yes.
Okay.
So now, if you put 15% of VAT on a price which has been multiplied by 15 times, clearly you can imagine how much VAT you're going to collect. So if you are exporting $1 billion, I would be correct to say we could be exporting $15 billion.
So this speaks to beneficiation.
Beneficiation. That is not happening with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. It's not happening when they are talking about issues of other value chain like cotton. They don't have sector-specific robust strategies on how they're getting there. But if you read the strategies for agriculture, they are very clear. And very clear set targets. I can give you an example. Their target for milk is 150 million liters, right? Now they are at 114 million liters. When the Minister of Agriculture was appointed, we were producing around 70 million liters. Now we're at 114. Do you see the trajectory? Yeah. So that's one such example. For national head, we were at 5 million heads. We're targeting to hit close to above 6 million heads. And that is happening. So I'm not just a critic behind the scene, and I've never said this detail, but I want to qualify it because this is what I've been doing because I would want to add value. The Minister of Finance, I engaged him. Direct. I got even his card. I sent him an email. He ignored it. I sent him a paper when he was doing the National Development Strategy 1. This is my submission. No response. In one meeting, I met him. I said, but you don't respond. He said, we have many advisors. Right? The current Minister of Industry and Commerce, I was talking about it. The Governor of Central Bank, when he gets in there, he began criticizing me, said something on the television.
So is it an issue of professors? Like if you come in and then you make a difference, then you make the professor look bad? Is it a professor thing? Is it an academic thing? Is it because obviously there are things that you know that he probably doesn't, and sitting down on a table and sharing is good for the nation. So why do you think that is? Why do you think, with your wealth of experience and knowledge, they're not willing to tap into?
So the first thing is that
the Ministry of Finance,
most departments of government are polarized. They don't want to engage you.
You're a bad guy.
You're a bad guy because you voted for Nelson Chamisa. Because it's in the public domain. But we are not talking about the 2023 election now, talking about national development, right? But other ministers also have got intellectual arrogance, where one would say, I was in the Cambridge University, I know it all. And eventually the results prove that. So I believe in collective efforts. I think if I was going to be minister tomorrow, you would want to hear all views. Because in leadership, there's a theory which says the best leaders, they use other people's brains, right? So if you're a leader, you must use other people's brains. Not because you don't have brains, but you collect all the ideas from everyone. Then you choose what you think is the best for you. When I was meeting Honorable Masuka, I was not dictating to him. We were discussing, at some point disagreeing, but I would respect his views on particular issues, and I will keep it in that context. And I would know even sometimes that his timing, he is going to do this, but he's not going to do it now. And I will respect that. And that's why you've never heard me. Because I have no space to criticize, because everything I've said, my views, what has been taken on board, I know it. What has not been taken on board, I know and why. And I respect that. I can remain open to future engagement, because my job is to be a nation builder. A nation builder has to be accommodative, respectful, and you must also have humility to know that this is not what is needed in this space.
Okay. What do you make of the recent monetary policy statement? I mean, was there anything positive that came out of that?
It's very difficult to get something positive in that monetary policy. I will look at two critical issues. The first one, the increase, central bank increased the export retention, what they are retaining from exporters rather. If you want to look at it from another side, they decreased what the exporters are getting. Yeah. So they increased to 30% what they are retaining. So that is an export tax when I look at it. Exporters already have difficulties in terms of competitiveness because of the controlled exchange rate, which makes it very difficult for them to remain viable. Some exporters have stopped exporting because the black market rate is higher than the official rate. Now, there's more pain for exporters who are largely exporters who get over 80% of their revenue from exports, because they are classified as exporters. Their revenue is US dollar. And those exporters have to pay electricity in US dollar. For example, the mining companies. I'm sure you appreciate that most of the minerals which are producing here are exported, no domestic sales. So they are not allowed to pay electricity in Zim dollar. No. Now, you have exported your minerals, and you have 30% of that in ZiG, but you're not allowed to pay electricity. There's a statutory instrument.
Which is a critical input in your...
Yes, which is critical input into your production. Secondly, they are not allowed to pay tax using ZiG, because they pay tax in the currency of trade, and the currency of trade is US dollar. Now, we have a mining company who is holding ZiG, and they don't know what to do with this ZiG, because you can't pay for electricity, neither can you pay for tax. So in actual sense, you are expropriating exporters' revenue. And that is very dangerous, because it's happening at a time when commodity prices had gone down. And we have seen mining companies were retrenching, and the government what they were supposed to be doing actually was to give them more attention. Yeah. But they've gone for the opposite, because government want to build the money. But also the other thing which I do not like about monetary policy is their approach to increase reserve requirement ratio of both the ZiG and the US dollars, to an extent that Reserve Bank retains 30% of foreign of a bank balance in the central bank. So if you have 100 million US dollars, 30 million is retained by it's not available for onward lending.
Is it not to safeguard depositors? What is the purpose of that 30%? Is it not to make sure banks are in a safe, healthy state?
Yeah. It is one of the reasons. The second reason is to also contain inflation from a money supply point of view. But from a US dollar perspective, you then wonder, we don't have inflation induced by money supply in the US dollar currencies. Yeah. Our inflation, which is 11% per month, very high since we dollarized, is caused by taxes, multiplicity of taxes. So that element of increasing reserve requirement, they've actually cut liquidity. And when you talk to businesses, they will tell you that it's difficult to get access to liquidities. Companies are going to their banks. We want a facility. Banks have no money. They're tied up. And also on the ZiG, it cut out liquidity on the ZiG, because government want to create artificial strength of the ZiG, maybe to build confidence, but it's too late. So that is a challenge which I saw in the monetary policy. The last thing which I want to talk about is the issue of the reserves. They are saying they've built about 500 million US dollars, and they are arguing that it's enough to cover the ZiG. If we want to support the ZiG and have a strong ZiG and retain our local currency, we must have 6-month import cover. In actual sense, we are simply saying our import bill per year is $9 billion US dollars. So we must have $4.5 billion reserves of foreign currency in the central bank. That will give us the impetus and the capacity to support our local currency. The challenge which we have is accountability and transparency. I have questions. Say, central bank, where is the money from two fronts? If they are taking 30% of the bank balances to build a pocket for the land, being the lender for the last resort, where is the money? How much money they've put behind central bank, right? And for exporters, they take 30%, right? Our exports per year is about $7 billion to $7.4 billion. So for argument's sake, let us say $7.4 billion. So we're talking about close to $2.5 billion, which they take per year. Okay. And by the way, the Treasury, they have their own foreign currency. To an extent that Guamatanga, the permanent secretary, brags that I have enough money than central bank, because they get it from taxes, right? With largely 80% and above of transactions are US dollars. So it's US dollars. So government has got its own foreign currency. And I don't believe the government would need to go to central bank to get foreign currency. So I'm trying to close that argument that they support Treasury. Now, the exporters, they also use their foreign currency they earn from an exporting point of view, so they don't need to go back to the bank many times because they also return their foreign currency. Those who don't export, they are selling to the informal sector and also the formal sector. They collect in foreign currency. They have their foreign currency. So I don't think there's too much pressure in the willing buy, willing sell. And you see the numbers are very small. How much central bank comes in and intervene, maybe 20 million, 15 million, tells you that there's nothing, no one is really active in that market. So where is the 2.4 billion, 2.5 billion central bank collects every year? Why are they telling us that we have $500 million? So there's not clear explanation coming to the public, and we have questions to that. They should come out and say...
So you're saying they should have a whole lot more than...
Yes, that they should have more than that. That will help us now to build the reserves of $4.5 billion. We could say maybe in 2-3 years we could be build that reserve if we have accountability. By the way, how much foreign currency do we get per year? $12 billion. Where is the money? We get 12 billion, about $7.4 billion coming from exports, right? Close to $2 billion, above $2 billion, diaspora remittances, we are almost $10 billion. $1 billion from the NGOs and the international donors, right? Then we have about close to $800 million from lines of credits. So we have enough justification to argue as economists to say, where is the money central bank? Because clearly you can't get that amount of money, which is more than 2 times most regional countries in the region, and we have a currency crisis in the region they don't have. So I have concerns when I see the monetary policy and those issues are not addressed. And so you then see some of their policy instruments become irrelevant and very weak to address the economic challenges we are facing.
So some of the biggest economic challenges we have are, of course, low GDP growth, 2%, high inflation, exchange rate fluctuations, high unemployment. How do we solve this? I mean, you're a professor of economics. How do they make this right? What happens? What do they need to do?
Correct. So that's a very interesting question. It's a very difficult one, by the way, in the sense that we need to do more work to address these challenges. So the central issue we need to address is production. And that's why it is very difficult. Because to address production, because for any country which is competitive, which is growing, which is creating jobs, the central major denominator in the equation of our policy making is production. And if we don't address production, that's why we are importing $4.5 billion, which I talked about, of chewing gums, toothpicks, Pampers, because not productive. Imagine if we were domesticating $4.5 billion in Zimbabwe, of vegetables, of pharmaceuticals, of iron, steel. We are creating jobs. So in actual sense, we are creating jobs outside the country. But the question, how do we address production? That's a big question. And I'll just highlight the critical pillars. First, we need strong institutions which cartels deal with corruption, because we lose $3 billion every year on average on corruption. So imagine, that's capital. If we want to go to IMF and World Bank to borrow money, there's no way they can lend us $3 billion. We lose $1.8 billion on illicit financial flows every year going out of the country. Imagine if that money is domesticated and is being used in Zimbabwe, directly towards production. What was going to happen to Zimbabwe? But imagine the report which we get from the Auditor General saying that how much money has been squandered by various units of government departments. And sometimes you see it's over $1 billion. That's why I'm talking about $3 billion. So we have a weak politicized institutions, and they cannot rein in corruption, and we are wasteful. And when you are wasteful, you become a country trading in commodity, in currency as a commodity. So we need strong institution. The second point which we need critical enablers. Your electricity. You can't be productive when you go for 18 hours without power, right? In the farms, in the industries, in retail. I've seen how much money has been lost in the mining sector. I think over $500 million through the energy, the cost of energy. So we are losing production time. So energy is very important. Water is very important. Good roads. when we talk of roads, we're not only talking about the highways. We're talking about the feeder roads, which feed from the farms to the secondary roads and the main primary roads. Now, how do you expect a company which is into agro-processing to go into the farms to contract farmers to produce a particular raw material when the roads are not accessible? Yeah. So accessibility is very important. So those are critical issues. I'm talking about roads. I'm talking about water. I'm talking about ICT. Data should be not very expensive like what you are getting in this country, ICT. So those are critical enablers. But the most important, the last point I want to talk about, we need to be banking our money. We need to be depositing our money in the bank. We need to be creating savings because savings are identical to investments. So if you invest into the economy, you're Granger causing production. But our savings are under the mattress, are under the compound roofs. And also Central Bank mentioned that. But why? Do you know why it's happening? For two reasons. One, a lack of confidence in the banking system because government has rained on the banks, on people's accounts from the time of Dr. Gono. Remember the $2 billion was rained on? People have lost their money in the bank. How many currencies have we lost in recent years? Six currencies which have lost. And people have lost their money in the banks. So the issue of confidence is critical from our history and from where we stand. And the flip-flopping on policies and the government is doing. Right now, we just lost the SIG. So coming back. The second reason is that the bank charges are massive. It's a nightmare. Yeah. To an extent that the major source of income from banks is bank charges.
So why would you bank? Like if you go to the ATM to withdraw $500, I think you're charged $15 or something crazy like that.
Correct.
So people, why would people bank?
Yeah, they avoid banking. So those are the critical enablers which you must deal with. But it needs serious emotional intelligence. It needs serious planning. You need the right political orientation as a country. We should be united as a country to say we want to address these issues as a collective unit. I'm mentioning this because in Malaysia in 1995, there is what is called 1995 or 1996, between those 2 years, the Great Langkawi Dialogue, where the Malay had a meeting and said, let's unite as Zimbabweans, let's work together to address our economic challenges. And they set up their master plans. We have not done this in Zimbabwe. I'm aware of the what we call ZCON. Have you ever heard about it? Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference, which is held in Victoria Falls every year, hosted by the Minister of Finance. But
is this not another talk show?
It's a talk show, but the point I want to raise is that I'm aware of my colleagues who were denied participation in that conference because they were not aligned to ZANU-PF mindset. So you will say Zimbabwe Economic Development Conference, and you select people on the basis of partisan, right? And I did not even dare to submit my abstract for submission for that conference because I knew that it's obvious I would be wasting my time. But in Zambia, they had a massive conference. I remember during the time when the Zambians had a challenge with their kwacha. Zambia did not just turn around by just miraculously. They had to sit down and come up with a conference where they had to prioritize 3 critical sectors of the economy: mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. But they had 10 sectors initially, and they were now narrowing them down to 3. So this is what people do when they want to save their country. We have not had a great indaba on addressing economic challenges. We've seen side show meetings which are like putting lipstick on a frog to make it a beauty queen. And, you always fail. Doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So this system of partisanship or whatever it is, we cannot have Mugano because Mugano is not ZANU-PF. Mm-hmm. Who's going to put it to bring it to an end? Because a lot of the people who organize these conferences have allegiances, right? Yeah. Like they probably, if you're the Minister of Finance and you're ZANU-PF Minister of Finance, you're very sensitive to these sort of things. Correct. So who is supposed to break the ice and have everyone at the table?
So ideally, the president must put it to an end. The president of the country, like in this instance, President Mnangagwa, he has a responsibility from a leadership point of view to say, we want to work as Zimbabwe in our diversity to build our country. I heard him saying it a number of times. Whenever he makes a speech, and I would want you to listen to his speech at independence, you hear him saying the same thing. I've heard him saying it a number of times. Even last week when he was in ZITF, I listened to his speech. He said that in our diversity, we must work together to help our country. Now, the problem I have with him and his government is that during the time of Robert Mugabe, you might not like him. But when he will say something, everyone follow. I used to work in government. My first job was in industry and commerce, as I said. Would watch the State of the Nation address. What he says, you listen, you take notes. And in as line ministries, you run with your narrative. So I have not seen it in this dispensation where the head of state speaks. And you see people doing the opposite. So in this particular instance, he's talking about tolerance. At one point in time, I reminded his spokesperson, Comrade George Charamba, when he attacked me. So I pulled out the speech deliberately. I knew it was going to happen. So I it was circulating on social media, the speech. I took a screenshot, I saved it. I was waiting for George Charamba. So when he hit me, I reminded him, it's there on my tweet. I said, but remember your boss said we must tolerate each other. So whom are you reporting to? So he went quiet. So it was there. But he came for a blessing. So that is very wrong. Because it's kind of insubordination, but also at the same time, it's kind of failure to implement what they want to be taken. So I would think that the president must insist, if he says, let's work, if he mean it. Because there's no one who can change that. We can talk here, but there's a center of power which should deal with it. And I think as long as the center of power has not seen that this is a problem and to enforce it, then we are not going to have a solution to this. Maybe we have to wait for another president to come who understands the importance of unity and national cohesion in the country.
Corruption. You mentioned corruption.
Yeah.
The vice president said, corruption is now a national security threat. Is this your sentiment? Is this how you feel? It
is my sentiments. In fact, I was very happy when he said that, because whenever the ZANU-PF government talks about sanctions, I always say that the biggest sanction we should give ourselves is corruption. Because the amount of money which we lose every year through corruption, the wastefulness which we have in our economy, which impede job creation, is deadly. So I agree with him. I listened carefully to Jealous Mawarere's interview last week, where he mentioned that, and it's very correct, that for every airtime or data which we use, we pay 5% of that, which should go for health fund. And he was posing some questions to say, on average, we should be, on an annual basis, it should give us a minimum of $35 million. So from 2017 to 2024, how many 35 millions which we have accumulated? And the figure was coming to close to above $200 million. And we've not had that money being reported in the budget, but it's been collected. And the people are suffering. Look at the health scare which we have. Now we have USA, they've withdrawn. America has withdrawn support to us, and they are one of the biggest funders to the health sector in Zimbabwe. And we have not put our house in order. We are eating money like we are eating mshonga wa msana. What are we doing? Clearly, we are exposing the country to social tension and to uprising, clearly because of the way we are squandering money. There's no jobs. But tell me something, Dan. How do you think the mood of people is when you see someone who has no evidence of a job creation, someone whom we don't even know where the company is spending over $10 million within a year and giving people motor vehicles? Amount of money which is enough to start a company. Does it cultivate a mood of being proudly Zimbabwean, or it give more despair. So it's not right where the whole social fabric is killed by corruption, and where you see people being told that they're going to court and they've squandered NASA funds, and the person said that she is not mentally stable to go through the process. Before you know it, she comes back as a ZANU-PF senator. Does it bring unity in the country in terms of confidence among Zimbabweans? Forget about investors. As Zimbabweans, can we say we are doing good? So it kills cohesion. When it kills cohesion, now, when you are now setting up your policies, we say there's no cohesion, there's no consensus, we are not aligned. Who implement the policy? It's not government. It is the people. It is the businesses. It is the players in the ecosystem of policy making who implement the policies. That's why you see people put their money under the pillow. That's why you see people putting the commodity in the informal sector. That's why you see people doing anything they can do for survival, because it's like a country where there's no leadership. So it kills the economy and it becomes a security threat. So the vice president is very right on this one. And I'm happy he raised it, because when we were raising it, we were given names, fake economists and all sort of things. But now they can't say fake VP because it's one of their own who's saying that. Okay.
Let's move on to shop closures and the struggles in the retail sector. Truworths, I'm sure there was an article just the other day. Truworths is a 67-year-old business. At their peak, I think they had 101 stores. And they were just recently rescued from bankruptcy. Same with, or not same, NR Richards has been facing struggles. They've closed down a few outlets. OK is going through some struggles as well.
Spa?
And Spa. What's happening in this sector, and how can this be resolved?
So that's a very important point which you are raising. So one of the critical issue which is not being mentioned with more hype is the issue of energy, power. They use a lot of electricity, these shops, particularly the supermarkets in particular. You have to have cold chains within their infrastructure. And look at with over 70 branches countrywide, how much power they want. And we have a situation where power has become a national security threat. And I advise over 50 companies, and I have told them, my clients, that now you must have a strategy on dealing with energy. And you must classify energy as a risk factor in your strategy, because you go for 18 hours without the power. It means you must use a generator. I've seen the accounts, the reports from OK. It's a public entity, and that's why I'm mentioning it. They have spent close to now $9 million US on energy this last year.
9 million.
Yeah, which is a double from the previous year. And one of the factors, so imagine you're putting close to $10 million on energy.
Which this is US dollars, because
US dollars,
like
not
you
ZIC.
said, they don't want ZIC.
No, the US dollars because of use of generators. And in one report, that was 2023, if I'm not mistaken, for Pick and Pay, they used previous year 37,000 liters of diesel in previous year. 37,000 liters of what? Diesel. In the current year of 2024, if I'm not mistaken, they used 3 million liters. So you can imagine from 37
times.
37, more than 10 times.
No, it's actually more.
Yeah, from 37,000, almost 1,000 times. Yeah, almost 1,000 times. Because if you multiply that by 1,000, it's 3.7 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so they moved from 37,000 liters, which was close to $64,000 US a year, to 3 million liters, which is 4.5 million liters. That is your working capital for restocking, which they've put to energy to pollute the air. Why? Because of energy. So that is a silent killer, which people are grappling with when they are looking at why these retailers and these shops are closing. So it's other companies are closing. So we need to deal with that issue. Then second issue.
But excuse me, Professor. So how come this is not affecting the other retailers? Because there are other retailers who are not in this mess that OK finds itself in.
No, but maybe before you do that, it will be fair for me to add maybe two other factors, just for completeness for the audience. The other one is the issue of exchange rate crisis, the currency crisis. You are aware the ZiG crashed in September 2024, and when a currency crashes, it is wiping your balance sheet. So this will help me then to answer your question. It will wipe your balance sheet because the company contracts. So I've also done a SNP survey, and I've noted that most of the companies I talk to, they are now 10% of what they were 5 years ago. So if a company was 100 million, right, in terms of net worth, asset base, it's now 10 million. And one of the major drivers there is a currency crisis. Whenever, in that day when the Reserve Bank depreciated or devalued the exchange rate, basically the money was crashed, the balance was wiped out. And that's one thing which, and the retailers faced the massive enforcement in terms of the exchange rate. And that is a challenge. Now, look at other shops which are doing well. I think look at their source, their background, who is owning them. OK Zimbabwe is owned by minority shareholders. It's owned by you and me from the stock exchange. Yeah. But Pick n Pay is a South African company. I am not privy to their strategy, what they are doing, but I can only prophesy that they could be having leverage to get support from the region. You know, as maybe as a war chest to remain in the market, but they're running at a loss. In case the OK Zimbabwe goes under and they become a monopoly, I'm just prophesying. I don't have facts on that.
The issue of management, do you not think that management could be a factor in OK's troubles? Because I believe I've heard that they have a bloated management, and of course, lots of resources are put towards their picks and benefits and that sort of thing. Could that be a factor, you think?
I heard it in the social media, but I think as an economist, as an academic, it would be wrong for me to say that's a factor, because I would ask you a question. Why was it working all these years? And overnight, it can't just work.
But so it's a developing problem, I guess.
No, yeah, but OK has not been in business for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so fundamentally, I would ask you that question. Say, why was it working? OK has got a number of units. It's got Bon Marché. Have got a number of branches across the country.
Is it not because of their size that they get affected?
Which is the point more? I'm saying that when you are bigger, you also need a big structure to support your operations and your oversight. So I would not want to use it as a street argument to say, because everyone is saying that. Because if it was working all these years and OK was a company which all of us wanted to work there, why was it working? The structure was the same. Okay. So I would, but then you would see that those two critical issues, the currency crisis and energy, are quite evident and vivid. That well, why I'm saying this, I would want the government to look at these issues, and obviously the shareholders of OK should also look at those concerns coming on social media on their management, because it could be a point, but it just became a point of discussion today, which was not there for decades and decades when OK was operating. So I will not just go by the wind, unless if I have hard facts to qualify that. In terms of energy, I was able to qualify that. In terms of currency crisis, I was able to qualify that, and I would argue in that line. The last point I left is the issue of compliance and the fees, payment of fees, which has become like a thorn on the flesh. And I think the challenge is it is two-pronged. It's not only on affecting OKs and other shops in terms of their competitiveness, in terms of the compliance cost, but it also affects on competitiveness because the informal sector does not pay those costs. So a consumer is faced with two markets: the informal market, where they don't pay all these taxes and levies, and OK Zimbabwe or another shop who has to comply. That again is a thorn in the flesh, and it increases the cost of commodities in the shops, which is not the case in the informal sector. And the informal sector wins the consumers.
Okay. I want to talk about the exchange rate, right? Like I had Eddie Cross on the show the other time, and we were just talking about, the reluctance of the authorities to float the exchange rate. Mm-hmm. Why is there this reluctance to float the exchange rate when all economists seem to point that the exchange rate should be allowed to find its true value?
Okay.
Why is there this reluctance?
All right, so that's an interesting question, and I also wish one day we will have a meeting with the governor and ask him the same question. Maybe from a policymaker, I can then speak from a point of involvement. But when I read it as an economist, is that the starting point, you can't. Central banks' hands are tied to float the exchange rate because they launched a currency which has no sufficient reserves, which is backing it. When the ZIG was launched, my argument was that it's going to fail, and I gave it 6 months. I was a bit prophetic, but it came out that the 6th month was September, and it crashed. And what I was saying there...
It crashed on the 6th month?
Yes.
Okay.
They crashed on 6th. It's there on my timeline.
You might want to consider opening a church.
I think I would do that.
Yeah, it's good business.
As long as you can be my...
Yeah, you make good money.
My assistant. But it crashed on 6th month. But it was logic which was looking at that there's not enough reserves. So fungibility became an issue to say when you put money, when business come and look for foreign currency from the auctions, from this foreign market system, they want to get it. So if central bank today has $4.5 billion, they will easily float the exchange rate, and it will not go anywhere. It will find its place, and it will stabilize. Because what causes the exchange rate to run away is a run on the foreign market, where you come every day, you are looking for money, and there's no enough foreign currency, and you are bidding. So they know the reality that if we float it, it's going to run away to the sky, and it will not stop until the currency crashes again. But again, not floating the exchange rate again, because again the currency.
So we understand why they're doing.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
So, but my argument was then to say, I was against the introduction of the ZIG because there were no priority requirement for its introduction. There were no minimum requirement for its introduction.
The fundamentals went
right. There are 6 fundamentals. The first one is you must have reserves of foreign currency. So that whenever anyone goes to the bank, they must get the foreign currency. And that's 4.5.
That's how you get confidence.
Yeah, that gives confidence. The second one, you must have current account surplus. When you're exporting, you must export more than what you're importing to guarantee liquidity flowing into the central bank and to guarantee the reserves from depletion. The third one, you must have single-digit inflation. The fourth one, you must have stable exchange rates, right, which are stabilizing. Before you even introduce it, you can't introduce new currency when the rate is running away, because we have already inbuilt expectation that we must be forward pricing. And it has been happening. The fifth one, you must have fiscal consolidation. What does it mean? You must clear your debt. Our debt level is almost 100% of our GDP. And as long as you have that situation, you cannot, and that should also be coupled with budget surplus. We don't have a budget surplus. We have a deficit every year in, year out. And when you are running a deficit, you go to the bank and borrow money to finance it. You're crowding out the private sector, and you push you have inflation hitting you. So the last one is production. You can't introduce a currency when you're importing toothpicks, chewing gums, pambas, fruit and vegetable from Polokwane. You are importing fertilizers. You are importing clothing. You are importing chickens. You are importing eggs. You are importing milk. We are importing milk, right? So how then do you defend the currency when you are draining $4.5 billion, which you can domesticate locally? So you weaken your currency. Why is South African rand strong? Because they are not importing from anyone. They are actually exporting them. They are importing from everyone, but they have a decent balance. The economy is working. So that is why they couldn't float. And that is why I was against the introduction of the ZIG. My argument was to build the necessary fundamentals, undertake a nationwide consultation to have an understanding why people are not happy with the financial system of Zimbabwe. go with them in terms of the decision to say, what should we do to guarantee safety and build confidence? So those things were not done. And unfortunately, we can continue to introduce new currencies. We can do it for 10, 20 times. As long as these 6 conditions I've talked about are not in place, we want to have a strong currency and we want to be able to float our exchange rate and we again have a currency which dies in the process.
So economists say the exchange rate must be allowed to float. If it floats, there will be problems. Also, at the same time, you don't want the authorities to dollarize, as there's also negatives to dollarizing. So what must be done now?
Correct. That's a very good question. So my view and my submission is that whenever we are now talking about floating the exchange rate, once we introduce the currency, tato ino nogera Colgate, not outenga Colgate, masino apera. You know, we should not talk about floating the exchange rate when we have 2 currencies, ZiG and the US dollar. We should take out the US dollar first and introduce the ZiG when the time is right. And if anyone wants foreign currency, you go to the foreign exchange markets.
So if the time is not right, like you are saying now.
Yes, you dollarize.
So we dollarize.
Dollarize. Yeah.
You don't want to see the ZiG. You don't. You're saying they
no,
must do
not
away.
Me.
Right.
But the correct
the economics.
thing,
What is the economics saying? We must.
Yes, yes, because you can't put the ZiG and the US in the same market, because the ZiG and the US is like road runner. Remember, I grew up in the rural areas, and the Munyeve.
Okay.
So no. When I'm eating in the rural areas, I will not choose Munyeve. Okay. I will choose the dollar. So the dollar is also an enemy of the ZiG. Okay. Or any currency.
It's more desirable than
because again we have a history that this local currency wiped our pension, wiped our savings, wiped our capital in the bank in companies. So as long as the dollar is in the market, we can do the jingles, we can do everything, we can do propaganda, but so we have to go with the dollar. Bite the bullet. There are disadvantages of the dollar, of competitiveness, but we must have the dollar, because even if we say there are disadvantages, did we lose the dollar by using the ZiG? No.
But like you are saying, competitiveness is very important, especially if we are to export and be competitive.
So what do we do?
How do we then grow?
Then we do what we call internal devaluation. So if we introduce the dollar, let's accept it. We have no decision here.
Okay.
The dollar was never invited by anyone. I can take you back to Honorable Shinamasa. He said he is the one who introduced the dollar. It's a lie. 2009, the governor of Central Bank, Dr. Gono, was giving followers license to the markets which were already using US dollars, $20,000 per each license, because he wanted to capitalize on the already momentum of what? Of dollarization. Honorable Shinamasa is the budget in 2008 for 2009 budget. In November 2008, he did it quintillions of dollars. But in February, he had to redo the budget. And it was $700 million, US dollars. That's where everyone was getting $100 US dollars. So if he is the one who introduced the dollar, why was he doing the budget in 2008 for 2009 in Zimbabwean dollar? So the dollar came on its own. And out of 33 countries which he dollarized, the dollar comes on its own. When the money becomes useless, the dollar comes. So the question of competitiveness does not arise to say, do we need it because it's not competitive? We have no choice. Like even now, we introduced the ZiG with a view to push out the dollar to go for a de-dollarization, right? Did we win? No, we didn't. Do we have the future of the ZiG? No, we don't have the future of the ZiG. So let's go back to the drawing board. Let's accept. Let's understand the challenges of the dollar. The challenge of the dollar is high cost of doing business. So what should we do? When you go for the dollar, you do what you call internal devaluation. Internal devaluation is cutting critical costs which are affecting business. And it's done in a tripartite, in a social contract. With the business must realign their cost profile so that they are able, because the price is a very fun thing. If I decide that my chicken is $5, someone has decided that my stock feed is so much. So if you go back in the value chain in a proper social contract and discussing and having a restraint in pricing, we can cut back our prices. That's what we should do. Because what we decide, of course, there's an international factor that we have to also bear in what we're importing as a raw material. But our electricity has to be dealt with in terms of the cost. Our tax regime has to be dealt with as a cost driver. Our levies have to be dealt with as a cost driver. That's what we call internal devaluation. It's basically looking at the cost drivers which are affecting sector by sector. And you set up working groups which are working on that. It's a temporary issue which you want to deal with strategically. Then, in that process, you must now build the reserves of foreign currency, which will give you the impetus to introduce the local currency, not a dual currency, a mono currency. So you can set 6 years to say we're going to go for 6 years, and with a clear de-dollarization roadmap, which is shared by the whole country, and you work towards it. So what we are doing, we are recognizing that the dollar is not an ideal case, and I agree. We jump the gun and we put the local currency. But we forget to know that as long as there are two currencies, whether you float or you don't float, the existence of the US dollar is a killer to the ZiG. And you can't take it out when there are already two in the market. So that is the tragedy which our policymakers are facing, and they are failing to see this, and they keep on believing that we can support the ZiG through a number of gymnastics, but in a proper function of the economy, we must not have two currencies in the economy.
Is their biggest headache not the issue of salaries? If we were to dollarize that whole civil servant workforce, is there enough dollars to pay everyone what they think they're worth?
So that's why I say we need a social contract, which is including labor, business, and government.
Because the minute you dollarize, civil servants are going to say 500 minimum.
No, but right now they're getting 300. When I was in government, when we dollarize, we were earning $100.
But are they all getting US dollars? See, ZiG is bridging a gap
ZiG
for
is
them.
small component, I'm telling you.
It's bridging a gap for them. Are you saying all civil servants are
How much
receiving
ZiG
US
do you have in the system? $3.5 billion in the circulation.
Are we talking real paper money or just ZiG in
Both
general?
the paper and in RTGS form.
Yeah.
According to my policy statement, $3.5 billion.
Do you believe that figure?
That's what they told us. And
do you believe that figure?
If I believe it because the volume of transactions which are happening largely US dollars. If ZiG was available, maybe we could have more. Even in government, they are paying more in US dollars. Yeah. So the point I want to submit is that $3.5 billion, if you use the official exchange rate, is just above 100 million US dollars. If you use the black market rate, it's below $100 million. It's about 90 million US dollars. So can we say that we have enough money in terms of ZiG to pay salaries in Zimbabwe and to finance transaction? We don't have we are a US dollar economy. We are already there. So we are afraid of what we are. We are a dollarized economy. We don't need to say we will not have enough money to pay civil servants. We are paying them $300, and that's what is coming from dollarizing. So already we have salaries in US dollars. So what will actually happen is that if they increase to 100% dollarization, government can actually get more scope for US dollars, because there are other statutory payments that are being paid by companies in ZiG to avoid the cost of paying US dollars. So, but for me, it will affect even the GDP, the growth, because the economy will contract. It's a disaster in which we are. So we must accept it. It's like you have gone to the doctor and you have sugar diabetes, and the doctor tells you have to cut your leg. And reality will push you to accept. So it happens in our life as individuals painfully.
So in other words, we're walking around with legs that we should have amputated.
Correct, and hoping for recovery.
But the recovery is not coming.
It's not coming because you have to amputate the leg first.
Okay. So dollarizing is the option that you think is the most practical right now?
Even if I don't think so, the market is the best constitutional court of economics. The ZiG is gone. Forget about the ZiG. Right now is holding in there because they are not paying contractors. I was talking to contractors who haven't been paid from August last year.
So it's artificial.
It's artificial. They are drying the market in terms of liquidity from a ZIG point of view. That's why I was asking you, do you know how much ZIG we have in the market? 3.5 billion ZIG. It's nothing. It's a clear demonstration that even central bank recognizes that the ZIG is not the currency. Because if they were believing their ZIG is a currency, they should be increasing more liquidity in ZIG. You can't do payments in ZIG. Even if I ask you, do you have the ZIG in your wallet? Do you in your mobile payment wallets? Do you have ZIG in your bank to pay anything? You don't have. I can prophesy. I don't have.
Are we opening this church? What are we?
You do open it anytime. But the point is that you don't have the ZIG. So government has already accepted that it cannot work. But they're just creating a false impression, taking day by day. But the ZIG is gone.
Okay, let's go to the informal sector, Prof. What percentage of the economy is informal?
No, thank you very much. So you can look at it from two ways by just defining this size of business taking place in the informal sector. We are talking about 80% of the businesses. So in actual sense, the formal businesses is shrunk to 20% of the economy, right? And the 80% is informal. But in terms of job creation, and I want to quote Zimstat's figures, how many jobs out of total labor force, and our labor force could be in the region of 60 million people, out of our population of 16 million people. And 87.7%, according to Zimstats, are employed in the informal sector. So in actual sense, the formal sector is employing only 12.3%. By the way, the Minister of Finance, when he did his National Development Strategy number 1, he was targeting to reduce informality from a job creation point of view from 76% rather, to 70%. So in actual sense, in 2020, people who were employed in the informal sector were 76%. And the people who were employed in the formal sector were 24%. In 2025, which is this year, he wanted to have 30% in the formal sector. Now, he has got left 12.3%. So he's failing the war with informality.
Okay.
So I am qualifying this because I want to build an argument saying it depends on which angle you are looking at it. You could use jobs which are being created, or the size of the businesses which are operating.
Okay, so without looking at formal or informal sector, how many Zimbabweans are employed, or what is our rate of unemployment?
Okay, so informal, now it's very easy.
Because you have to tie down the two figures, right?
Yeah, you have to. Unemployment is 87.7%. Because if you're so
we're unemployed, but our people are employed.
So no, we have to define it properly.
Okay.
Formal unemployment. Why I'm saying, because I wanted you to see the problem.
Okay.
Formal unemployment is 87.7%. That's why you hear people saying our unemployment is around 90%.
Okay.
It's clearly from the point of saying I'm in the streets.
Right.
Because the proper definition of unemployment is the number of people or a percentage of people who are actively looking for a job. So that's a normal definition for a normal economy. Okay. In Zimbabwe, Zimbabweans are not. So we don't have people who are looking for jobs. So they are busy working.
They are unemployed, according to official figures. Because
they are formally unemployed.
They're formally unemployed.
But otherwise, in terms of definition of Zimstats or conventional definition, unemployment, they're employed. But as a nation, do we want to fool ourselves to say our unemployment level is 11%? Okay. We are better than South Africa. So why are we going there to South Africa to look for jobs? If South Africa has got 30% unemployment,
okay,
it means they have a bigger problem. South Africans should be coming here, but we are going there. Because of the... So when you look at Zimstad's figure in terms of unemployment, it's around 12%. And what are they looking at? They are looking at that definition, but also, well, they will ask you, what were you doing when they were doing census or selling airtime for the last 3 days, 4 days? You were employed. So you have to define it from the context of the sector in which you are operating in.
So the 12%, is it unemployment or employment?
It's unemployment percentage. So because they assume that you are employed. If you talk to government ministers, they will say our unemployment level is below 20%, it's 12%, because they look at the definition of what is unemployment. It is the number of people who are actively looking for a job. How do you see that? You go to employment agents to look for applications. That's number one. So which Zimbabwean is looking for jobs to go into employment agents? You should be insane. Because that is not, it is now history. It's no longer the culture. Yeah. But in South Africa, when you finish your qualification, you go to employment agents of your sector, you leave your applications. So states South Africa, every time they have live data of people who are looking for jobs, because their economy is functioning. You leave your application, you are called for interview, so you have hope. So in our instances, our national employment councils, sector-specific, are not working. So we then end up defining it from a textbook definition, but as the economist, we've now looked at it from a formal unemployment and informal employment.
Okay. So with 80% of the economy now informal, how can the tax authorities ensure every business contributes to the fiscus?
It's very difficult. It's a very difficult question, because how do you force people to comply? I've seen they've put measures like payment of presumptive tax, which is a normal practice in any country. They are now talking about putting point of sale in the streets and pavements. I think they are now losing their brains, because imagine going to with a point of sale to the streets, to the informal sector. Remember, you also need, you want to tax those who are selling chibage. But also remember, you need...
But they're not licensed.
They're not licensed. Now they're saying if you are going to renew a license with City Council, you must have a bank account, so that they can force you to be formal. Do you know what Zimbabwe will do? Zimbabwe will simply open a bank account to get a license, and after...
No traffic.
No transaction. Or they don't even go to get license. Now, the challenge they have is to enforce compliance. Because you might also want to ask how many people are in the informal sector. The Finscope report, which I checked, showed is close to 6 million, 5.7 million people in the informal sector. Now, how are you going to arrest 5.7 million people, or to go to police them, to push them? The people who are in Magaba, who are in Mbare, who are in Nguboenja, in Bulawai.
And do you have the capacity to give all of them POS machines,
exactly,
even if you want?
Exactly. Do you have enough Zimbabwe people to go after them?
Yeah.
It's a circus. So you can only deal with the informal sector, which is sizable. The level at which we have arrived, again, I've said it on Twitter, that the informal sector is now a security threat as well. I called the informal sector as the hyenas of the economy. If you watch movies, you see that if a lion catches a prey, the hyenas can even fight a lion and take the prey. I've seen it in many instances on YouTube. And that is the informal sector. They will fight the government from the tax point of view. And I'll give you the figure, very simple. In September 2024, the Minister of Finance produced their reports in the budget for 2025. They showed how much money they had collected by September 2024. They had collected 63 billion ZiG. If you divide the 63 billion ZiG by black market rate of 40, that's $1.5 billion. And I'm deliberately quoting a black market rate for one simple reason. That even if it is not an official rate, but when people are pricing government for supply of services, whether it's construction,
that's the rate
it is embedded in their cost, even if it is not pronounced on their invoice, because they want to replace the cost. So naturally, government will pay black market rate.
Yeah.
So in actual sense, government had actually raised 1.5 billion the third quarter of the year against a target of $6.75 billion that third quarter of the year. you see the incapacity of government in collecting what? Revenue. If they want to go by the official exchange rate of 25.6 ZiG against one ZiG, it's 2.5 billion they collected.
It's still
It's again
short.
nothing. That's why you see that they're struggling to pay salaries. In civil servants, relatives who are getting their salaries later on, they're not getting it on time. You know, there are delays in payment of salaries of civil servants. And the government is also failing to pay contractors. Even if we say they want to support the ZiG, they don't have enough money. So already the government is finding it difficult. That's why they are even coming up with the point of sale in the informal sector, which is very funny, actually. But also the informal sector is, the last point I want to talk about is how much money they were able to collect in terms of 2% tax. The informal sector has moved to a cash transaction. Again, it's a way of evading tax. When the 2% tax, the IMTT, was introduced, government was collecting between 16 to 20% of total revenue coming from 2% tax. This last year, they averaged between 3.4% and 4% total contribution. So you see, it used to be a major driver of revenue. It has gone down. What has happened to corporate tax? Government used to collect 15% to 16% of revenue from corporate tax. The average revenue they are collecting from corporate tax of total revenue is around 9.5% now. Why? Because the business is folding. The contribution is now smaller going to government. So government is getting broke. And I always laugh at the ministers when they say, we'll not get it broke. It is business which will get it broke before we get it broke. Now government is broke.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on taxation as a tool to increasing revenue? Eddie Cross recently spoke and was saying in South Africa they have 7 taxes. In Zimbabwe we have 51 taxes.
Yeah. No, South Africa, they don't have 7 taxes by any imagination.
Okay.
Because you are looking at, there are various taxes which are paid in any country. In the tourism sector, I did a study. The South African government, I benchmarked South African government and Kenya and Zimbabwe, trying to see how much taxes are being paid. They're paying around 20 taxes in the tourism sector alone.
Okay.
The only difference between Zimbabwe and South Africa and Kenya is that in South Africa and Kenya, they use what you call a single window payment platform, where you just pay to Kenya Revenue Authority at once, and you pay in minutes. Then in Zimbabwe, you go through 13 agencies based on my research. So, but the bottom line is that South Africa, Mauritius, and other regional countries have got few taxes compared to Zimbabwe, but 7. I think it was the
exaggeration. I mean, that's Eddie Cross. But the point is, so are we one of the most highly taxed countries?
If not in the world. If not in the world, but we just disagreed on the number of taxes to say 7. It is not. Yeah? Okay. Because if you think of corporate tax, pay as you earn, and value-added tax, and you go to mineral taxes, which are in any country, you go to sectoral taxes, you can't say 7 taxes.
So is there an advantage to having less taxes? Do you get to collect more revenue if you simplify the tax regimes?
Correct, yes. And the critical word which you have raised is simplification of the tax regime. You need to reduce the taxes in terms of the number of taxes and also the tax escalation by increasing the quantum of taxes. The benefit is that you grow an economy. So you better have a 10% of an elephant than to have 100% of a rat. So in our current instance, our Minister of Finance has become a Minister of Taxation. He is now putting 100% taxes on a rat. He has lost the essence of economics, the principles of an efficient tax regime. It must be easy to administer. It must be efficient. It must be cost effective. You know, you must not feel the burden of paying tax as if you are looking for working capital. Yeah. I'm aware. I advise over 50 companies as my clients on economic issues. I am aware of some clients who have gone to the bank to borrow money to pay taxes. That's treacherous, so it must be easy to administer. It must be cost effective. And then you have a growing business. Do you know the 2% tax on its own? I did a study. 2% tax was coming to, if you go through a value chain, the cost of 2% at each node of the value chain, each stage you pass through, from the farm to processing, it depends on how much stages it goes through. The cumulative effect can go to 30%.
Okay.
Yeah. In some sectors where they are short value chain, the cost of that tax, if it goes to the value chain, it can go to 17%. So in actual sense, if you are selling a commodity of $100, $17 is going to the 2%. So you see that it is becoming a burden, and you see that even demand goes down because it becomes very expensive. And by the way, that 2% tax, the import duty combined, kills businesses. I'm sure you've seen a note from Tongat, the one in sugar industry in the lower field. They indicate that they are shedding off workers because of the high tax regime. And you know what has happened? The tragedy, the imported sugar doesn't pay VAT.
Okay.
But the local sugar pays VAT. So already, you have two sugars. One which is imported is cheaper by 15%. Your local sugar is, so that's inconsistent.
Surely that's an oversight, isn't it?
It's a massive one. Someone should be fired. If I was the president, I would fire the Minister of Industry and Commerce and Minister of Finance. So what are you doing? Because particularly Minister of Finance, but that's a tax issue. Yeah. So that's a dangerous one. And it also happened when government opened up the borders for those commodities which I was talking about. The basic commodity. Remember, there's a time they opened up for soap, sugar, basic commodities, because they were saying local companies were high costing. They were coming duty free, but in Zimbabwe, and duty free, VAT free. In Zimbabwe, how much were paying VAT? So that's how you wonder what kind of policy making is this? Are these ministers really aware of this tragedy they are making in the economy through our tax regime, or they are daft? Yeah.
And as we go towards the end of the episode, I want to find out from you, how does what's happening in America affect us with regards to tariffs on China, tariffs on, I'm sure tariffs on China affect us somehow, don't they? Yeah. And also to do with the issue of US aid and how they've withdrawn support for these donor agencies.
Okay, that's a good one. So now, the key markets for the global economy is America, Europe, and Chinese market. And China is the biggest economy in the world, second biggest economy in the world. And one of their key markets is America. Their biggest export market is Europe. Number 2 is America. And China is the biggest producer of base metals. And when Trump put some tariffs on Chinese commodities, particularly the iron and steel industry and the automobile sector, clearly we are also going to face the challenge, because we export base metals, your platinum, your chrome, your also we are big in lithium now. So the automobile sector, your electric vehicles, there's going to be a reduction in prices of commodities again. We were coming out of a cycle where commodities had gone down. I'm sure you've seen mining companies are retrenching in Zimbabwe because of the depression or depressed commodity prices in global markets. That was because of the Russia-Ukraine war. The Russia-Ukraine war had caused slowdown in economic growth in a major economy, America included, Europe included. And those are the biggest demanders, consumers of minerals. The commodity price went down. Now, there is a hope of resolve in terms of the Gaza crisis, but also it was a bigger player, a bigger factor in these commodity prices, and also the peace talks around Russia, Ukraine. Now there is now a new factor called Trump economics, where he's now saying, make America great again. And he's saying, it's inward looking. He's coming with a protectionism agenda. So he's closing the borders. So if you want to sell these commodities, come and invest in America. So he's actually slowing down the global economic growth. And there's going to be a decline again in commodity prices. And we are going to be victims because 70% of our exports are minerals. So in actual sense, 70% of foreign currency receipts are minerals. So we are going to see decline in foreign currency receipts unless if exporting companies revamp production, exporting more to combat that loss of revenue. But if they maintain the status quo in terms of their volume, that is a possible risk coming to Zimbabwe. And that will affect us in terms of our going concern as an economy, availability of foreign currency, and the currency crisis.
Right, and the withdrawing of aid,
Yes.
USAID and all these other, those are direct, that's
Very
directly
direct,
affects us.
very direct in the sense that in terms of foreign currency receipts, if you check on central bank reports, 20% of foreign currency receipts in Zimbabwe, which is close to $1 billion, plus $1 billion rather, comes from international aid, remittances. Not diaspora remittances. Diaspora remittances is another level. Yeah, but we get over $1 billion from NGOs, and the biggest donors to Zimbabwe is UK aid and the US aid. I don't have the exact figure of who is bigger, but I can tell you that tens of thousands of health workers in Zimbabwe were supported paid by USAID program. The drugs which we're getting in our hospitals were paid by the USAID program. I hear figures of over 80% of support in our health sector coming from international development partners under the World Health Organization support. And the withdrawal of USAID has got a serious, massive consequences on our health sector, education sector, and the humanitarian side. Remember, we have 49% of our population living in extreme poverty. And if you look at ZIMVAC report, what is called Zimbabwe Vulnerability Assessment Report, produced by the National Food Research Council, from CIDIC, provinces such as Manicaland, Matabeleland South, Matabeleland North, Masvingo, they are so prevalent. They are supported by a World Food Program. And this I'm aware from. I also did the research in those provinces as far as Cholocho, Ngai, Kutu, you can go as far as Chipinge, Bohera. They survive on aid. So what it does, it now puts pressure on the government of Zimbabwe, Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, to up the food aid and social safety nets at a time where Zimbabwe's budget is constrained because of informality, underperforming of the economy. Zimbabwean government is now faced again with the health sector, which need to be given more support in terms of financial support at a time again when government is failing to pay for services such as construction work and the budget is tight. So I would want to classify this withdrawal of USAID as a security threat. I was very surprised that I see senior official government in Zimbabwe, including Ambassador Mchangwa, celebrating. He did a press conference, the withdrawal of USAID. I said, does he know what he's talking about? I saw even Joe Charamba celebrating it on Twitter, saying now you're jobless. He's celebrating joblessness in the NGO sector, but those people were part of the providing liquidity in the market, because when this money comes through, it exchanges hands. Yeah. So
and they were also paying taxes.
Yeah, they're also paying taxes, but also to say, even to think of, forget taxes, let's think about the health sector. Let's think about the food aid. Let's think about the support they give to the education sector, the HIV and AIDS support. So government need to look at this issue as a serious issue, and now start to replan and reprioritize their resources to say how are they going to mitigate this risk. even to a point of now improving transparency and accountability in how the funds are being managed. When we were starting talking about the health fund, which is raising quite a reasonable amount of money, the Minister of Finance introduced sugar tax. We did not see how much money was used from sugar tax in supporting the health sector. So now accountability is now calling more on government to say they need to be more accountable, account for every cent, be transparent, and try to avoid leakages, because this is going to affect us in a big time. Trump is not joking. I've seen USAID workers being given letters to go home, and he is not a person who give policy statements without serious intention to implement it.
Yeah. There was a discussion about what Trump has done. I mean, what do you think? It appears to me like he's doing the right thing. Why must governments get donor funding for critical things which they could actually finance themselves? Okay. Do you because it's like us in Zimbabwe, if the tax authorities are raising money and that money goes towards supporting other economies in other countries when things are not that well off in America, there are lots of people who are struggling. Correct. But they're busy, spending money all over the world.
Correct, yeah. No, you're quite right. The challenge, ideally, we must be our own bosses, but we have irresponsible governments across Africa, Zimbabwe included in particular, because how would you preside over corruption every year in, out, year out? You are losing several billions of dollars and you think you are responsible. We are wasteful. We celebrate nonsense when someone is just dishing out cars when there's nothing in the hospital, right? So what do? If I look at it, I would accept if we are given support, because I've told you we have 49% of people living in extreme poverty. That is going to bed without eating, or they are living on a less than $1.90 per day. People are vulnerable, and our government is not responsible for that. You've seen pictures going around social media, those accident victims who were given card boxes as part of the remedies to stretch their legs. That's a sign of being having an irresponsible government. So I cannot sit here and say they've done a good thing. If we had a responsible government which cares for the people, we should not be talking about this subject. Just imagine what will happen to people under ART program, the HIV and AIDS program. What is happening to their life? So we have disaster in the air, hanging in the air. So I would rather think that, and also remember, America became irresponsible as a global citizen leader. But the idea of aid is to try to level the playing field by sharing wealth with the poor countries. That's why countries have a convention. They have agreed that they must put 0.5% of their GDP to aid.
Is it not for them to have influence over politics of,
Eventually, aid comes with donor conditionality, which is the problem of aid. Yeah. But if I were our own government, we should have escaped this whole tragedy way back, because we're a rich country with over 60 mineral resources. But
are you not going to accept, as the leader of a country, are you not going to accept $100 million worth of aid?
No, but I'm saying let's put our house in order first.
Yeah.
You can't say we don't want aid when you are poor. It's like you are in the streets, you have no accommodation, you have nothing to eat, and you want to be a gentleman for nothing. That I don't want anything. That's you are losing your mind when you should be taken to Inguchen. Yeah. So I would rather want us to put our house in order and say, Zimbabwe, we should have Zim aid. Yeah. Then we say we are helping other countries because we are leading, and with that capacity. I've just told you what could happen if we evaluate our tobacco. Mm-hmm. We could actually aid other countries, but we can't do that. We're not given rice by Chinese, which has been donated to communities by ZANU-PF MPs, what. So we have problems, social problems. We have food insecurity, massive food insecurity. we have massive decay in the health sector. The health sector has become death traps, right? Roads have become battlegrounds, you know? See the accidents happening in the roads, on the roads. It's a sign that our infrastructure is not coping with the traffic, and there are problems there. Even you have been in South Africa. Look at their roads, you know? We don't have 4-way in Zimbabwe. We just have 2-way. So you can say we are so squeezed. So we should deal with our issues. Trump has just given us an eye-opener, but it's like you have thrown away the baby and the water. That's what he has done. Yeah. But the challenge now, our government is not going to be responsive. They don't have capacity. Right now, even if they want to be responsive, they have no capacity. They have no money to fill in the gap which was being filled by development partners.
So you're saying they should have been given notice? As from next year, we're not going to be giving you funding?
Even in next 5 years, we have no capacity to do that as long as we have ZANU-PF government in office, because they are running down the country.
So you as an economist, are you, of course you mentioned that you would be interested in assisting. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the reality of the situation is that ZANU-PF is here to stay. And people like yourself who have brilliant ideas and knowledge and expertise should come on the table and do your bit in terms of assisting with, your knowledge and expertise.
Correct. So what ZANU-PF failed to do, which we discussed in our initial segments, was that they failed to tolerate views. They've stayed in politics even after elections. They've thrown away anyone who wants to knock on their door to help them. So the conviction I am now saying is based on experience to say. It's kind of a conclusion of our structure and our behavior of government that as long as they are there, it's like you are having a driver who is driving a bus, who drives a bus without brakes, who drives a bus when he's drunk. Basically, you are assured that you have accidents. So our policy-making matrix is not being done in a proper manner. There's no inclusivity. There's no stakeholder engagement, which is all inclusive. There's no soberness when they're going to policy making. There's politicization of policies. And when they recruit you to work with them, like in my case, when I was a chairman of Zisco, they tell you that you are now part of us, you must now support our nonsense, you see. And that is what is wrong with ZANU-PF. So I was saying in one program, for me, it's not about the name ZANU-PF. It's about the culture they've set. They've set a culture of whipping people. You must never disagree with us. They've set a culture of fear. They've set a culture of recklessness in terms of overseeing national resources. That's why you see that we have massive corruption. Just last week or so, we were the new ranking we came out in terms of our positions in corruption in the globe. We are top, we're in the bottom. We are over 150 out of 173 countries. So we are on the bottom. We are not attractive. So for me, where I sit, I'm dying to see a country where any leader who is in office run the country in an ethical, moral way. That's why in other countries, they don't care who gets in power. They want constitutionalism, rule of law, respect of property rights, and good governance. That is our issue. And this is what ZANU-PF is failing to do. That's why even themselves, like the vice president, is admitting corruption is now a security threat. Who is in charge? It is them. They are admitting failure by saying that. That's why we are saying as long as they are in there, don't Mugango is ZANU-PF.
Yeah, but if you look at the other side of things, there is no opposition. So my thoughts are that people like yourself with requisite expertise and knowledge should sit at the table.
You're forgetting that I was fired from Zimtrade.
Yeah. Do you not believe maybe you're too vocal because people,
what is wrong in being vocal?
Do you know who the people who loses out the most? It's not ZANU-PF. Because ZANU-PF is going to keep going. The people, the people of the country who could benefit from you being on the table. Because if you're on the table, I'm sure you make more of a difference than if you're shouting from outside.
Look, let me tell you.
Because there is no opposition to talk of if you really look at where Zimbabwe is today, as it right now.
Yeah, that's an open discussion. But what I want to tell you, there should be tolerance in the country.
Yeah.
I'm not too vocal to an extent that a minister should really say my first assignment once appointed into cabinet, I should fire Mugano.
Yeah, that's not right.
Yeah, if I was a technocrat in South African country, being a South African, and I criticize ANC, and I'm sitting in the board of a parastatal in South Africa, I would not think that a minister for the line a parastatal would fire me. Yeah. No. I've seen Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, His Excellency, working on the tie of Julius Malema in one function where they were meeting. I saw him, President Ramaphosa, giving a hug to a young youth who was registering members of EFF and say, I'm a fighter as well. What are you doing having conversation? I admire that. In Zimbabwe, the moment you disagree, because you know why we are saying what you're saying, is we are saying exactly what ZANU-PF was saying during the time of the Smith regime. ZANU-PF, our liberators in ZANU-PF, in ZAPU, in all over the corner of the country, not only ZANU-PF, because I can tell you it's not only ZANU-PF which liberated us. My parents, my relatives went to war, they went to ZANU-PF, they are war veterans. They were going against an oppressive system. So, and His Excellency, the President, Comrade Mnangagwa, did more vocal when he was during the time of the Smith regime, and he was arrested for that. And he missed death by a whisker. I'm talking to you right now. Can we say I'm vocal in this conversation? This is what I do every day.
You're misunderstood. Is that it?
But even when I say I'm misunderstood, it's wrong. Well, it's the very same thing why the liberators went to war to liberate the country. So you can't replay the Smith formula against your own citizens. The very same thing which people lost their life, which they suffered, and we still have them in our modern day, the Obama Chinguru of this world, they fought for this country, right? So has she forgotten what she went to war for? What was it like? We read it in history, some of us. It was bad. But what we are reading in history is what we are seeing today, where people are being, the oppressive regime is in play. You are saying that the opposition is not there. Yes, it's not there. We're not seeing it there. Why? Because of the oppressive regime which is dismantling the opposition. What happened to Triple C? Who is Jabang? So let's be very practical. Zimbabwe, we are not daft. But is it the Zimbabwe which we want? But do you know, as you've said, who suffers? It's the economy and the poor people. So I would think that this whole nonsense of saying, we don't care about anyone, it must stop. We are Zimbabweans. And when we are divided, we can't win the war against poverty. When we are divided, we can't build a prosperous country. No, we are being mocked everywhere we go. Look at how many Zimbabweans are out there. In Durban, I saw Zimbabweans sleeping under a bridge, sleeping on the ground. It's so painful what people go through out there. So honestly, because of power, because we want to rule, the Chinese, they do it in a different way. Yes, there's a Communist Party, but Chinese have been there in China twice. They don't go. They love their government because it is a responsible government. Sana. And like what you are saying, some of us were even told, it's about, is it what we want as a country? So that's where we are failing. And if leadership is failing, we should be united on developing our country. Must have national cohesion. It must never be an issue. I like Kenya. Look at Kenya, what they are doing. President Ruto and His Excellency Raila Odinga. You see that there's chemistry. They are working together as brothers. But here, as you are saying, I'm not a serious political figure, but there are a lot of questions raised about me as if I'm a threat to the country. A simple, harmless guy from Chimani who has no reckon, who has no gun, who is just speaking as an academic. I was fired in the board. I was fired in one of the universities here because I've criticized a particular policy. So I should now clap my hands and say this is a good policy. No, I'm not a collaborator of a political party. I'm an academic and I'm a think tank. And if I am wrong, why did everything I've said come to pass? It's because there is a grace. We all have grace. It's not wisdom, it's a grace. It's not knowledge. Knowledge is secondary. It's grace. And they should see. And I'm not the only one. I saw you having a conversation with the Honorable bit here. And you could see the ideas coming through could change the nation. But you say, I don't want to talk to Honorable Biti because he's opposition. Then you're not serious. So you are just like Smith. The very same thing when you say we want the freedom of expression. That's what we learned in history. We want the one man, one vote. We want democracy. Is it democracy? We want the rule of law. Today we're talking about Breast Mkanga, who is in jail. And you say, it's okay. No, it's not okay. It's wrong. And unfortunately, the challenge we have, we suffer. And we continue to be Zika wherever we go. Unfortunately, we are just people. Leadership, as long as it does not rise to say, let's do the right thing. When I say rise, I'm simply saying, rethink what they are doing and say, let's do the right thing as Zimbabweans, for the sake of Zimbabweans, to leave a legacy. What is the legacy the ZANU-PF leaders are going to leave for this generation? Legacy of looting, legacy of Gandanga, a legacy of buying cars to give a car to someone who is just making noise on social media because you have just supported ZANU-PF. A legacy of buying Jutangwena for my war veterans. No, that's not it.
Professor, we need you on the table. I want to thank you for coming today and sharing your insights. I think, like you rightly said, everyone who's worthy should be on the table to help deliver a better Zimbabwe for everyone, regardless of your political affiliation. So I want to thank you.
My pleasure.
Professor Gift Mugano. Be sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next week. Ciao.
The Denny Show. Zvanga zviri down to up tauratidzwe nyaya dzacho dzese narrative ndaichidwe kana mchida kutipisa deep ndaipidwe make you spill a bean if you know what I mean.